Radio personality Tbo Touch is to take his DataMustFall campaign to Parliament. He's calling out local telecoms companies for exorbitant data prices. Tomorrow, the Portfolio Committee on Telecommunications and Postal Services will host public hearings on the cost of communicating. Let's get some insight from Stuff Magazine's editor-in-chief, Toby Shapshak. Toby, good evening to you. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Let's go back to why South African data costs are so high in the first place.
Because they can be. There is no overbearing regulator that keeps the costs down. And we've seen this with voice calls. It was only very aggressive moves by ICASA with the blessing of the communications minister that brought the cost of voice calls down. And the networks have been able to arbitrarily inflate the cost. There was a time where it was a very expensive thing to provide the internet connectivity from South Africa to the rest of the world through the undersea cables was very expensive. That's no longer the case. We live in a world where data is the new voice. Data revenues are plummeting. Voice revenue is plummeting, data use is growing, and it should be cheaper. And the networks are going to milk it for as much as they want. In South Africa, generally the networks, except for Telkom, who've introduced very good bundles called Freeme, the networks, if you out of bundle, charge you R2 a megabyte. That translates to 2,000 Rand a gigabyte. And you hear these horrendous stories of people getting several thousand rands worth of data bills because they've gone out of bundle. And I have this conversation with the networks. I've been having it with them for years and years. And I say to them, why do you hate your customer? Who in their right mind would charge their customer exorbitant amounts of money for actually buying something you want to sell them? Why would you punish them if they go out of bundle for such exorbitant rates? And the answer has generally been, well, we want people to take a data bundle. Well, why does it matter if people are in a bundle or out of a bundle? They're going to use the data. So the situation is they've been able to do it for years and years. They're resistant to change, as you would expect from a company that's used to very fat, juicy profit margins.
So they're greedy, essentially.
Well, yeah, that's one way of putting it. But they're businesses that are taking the opportunity to continue billing the way they have without changing it. And it's punitive on the user. It's punitive on the consumer. Why should you pay 2,000 Rand? There's been some very interesting research that's come out of it. The World Bank's done it. Research ICT Africa have done a written submission. And they're saying some lower income earners can spend as much as 20% of their income on airtime. I mean, this is iniquitous in the worst sense of the word. It's diabolical, and the sooner it changes, the better.
You know, the telecommunications minister wants to find out whether there's perhaps a lack of competition between service providers, perhaps not enough smaller providers entering the market that's responsible for this. But do you think that this could be attributed to a kind of collusion between the services?
Well, there has been a duopoly for the most of the time between Telkom and between MTN and Vodacom. They've been the big players. Cell's come in. Telkom Mobile is the smallest. You know, it's unusual to see Telkom being the underdog, and yet they've been very aggressive with their pricing. I mean, there's a lot of competition between the communication ministers trying to work out who's who and who's doing whatever. So, you know, we have dysfunction at the policy level, dysfunction at the department level. No wonder there's no clarity around this kind of thing. But it would take a real foresightful company, and they would get a lot of credit from their consumers if one of the big cell phone companies went, you know what, we actually want our customers to like us, and we're not going to punish them if their data bundle runs out. I mean, it is truly iniquitous. I mean, there have been stories of people getting 13,000 Rand bills from, you know, their kids watching too many YouTube videos. It's completely insane. It shouldn't happen. And it doesn't seem like the cellular networks are going to do anything about it, because it's been an issue for so many years. Finally, it's broken into the kind of mass consciousness. Tbo Touch has kind of sparked it. You know, I wrote my column for the Financial Mail saying if you want to get anything done in South Africa, start a hashtag that ends in must fall.
But let's see how consumers are going to respond to that, because he's calling for consumers, if they're not happy with their data bills, to actually switch to a cheaper service provider. Number one, who is the cheaper service provider, even if that's a relative question. Secondly, if, as you say, companies like Telkom have made an effort to price down aggressively, why aren't South African consumers responding by taking up those?
Well, there's a level of inertia that involves moving your from one service provider to another. You keep your number. For a lot of people who use pay-as-you-go, they just drop their phone number and get another one. That's called churn by the industry. But I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but actually the best deal right now comes from Telkom. They offer very good packages. They offer data only. They've understood where things are going, and because they only have 2% of the cellular market, they're able to do things very aggressively, and they've launched some very aggressive packages and some very funny advertising around it. But this segment of the cellular industry is ripe for disruption. We've had a cut in the call fees led by ICASA, and what we need now is ICASA to kind of find its backbone again and say, these are the costs for data. It should be dropped. You can't, in a way, blame these cellular networks. They are businesses operating within a legal situation that allows them to profiteer, and to profiteer handsomely from us. I often get asked, why don't we have a Silicon Valley in South Africa? Where's the next Instagram? Where's the next WhatsApp? Well, the problem is the kids, the youth, who are most likely going to come up with that idea in their 20s, like Zuckerberg did, or Steve Jobs, or Bill Gates. They're more paranoid about running out of airtime than thinking up the next big idea. It's about time that this kind of anger that Tbo has touched on really becomes into something worthwhile.
I think he needs to incorporate you into his campaign as a spokesperson.
I'll get out there and start throwing bricks.
Thank you so much for joining us. Stuff Magazine's Editor-in-Chief, Toby Shapshak.